finance leaders, all of our finance leaders, is their capstone course before they graduate. It's a 3-year program. They go through different rotations. They get in their 3rd year. We cap it off with a key case study. And of those 40 people, what's really, really cool is they get to demonstrate what they've learned to the corporate leaders of how we pursue and capture business.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's fascinating. And I think there's an awful lot of tie-in, between corporate learning and K12.
Yeah,
that's where I had my background, actually, was in corporate learning originally, and you keep sort of trickling down to figure out where the skills and the that's great. Well, it's good to have you here. And Shannon, how about you? Where are you from? What's your interest and background?
Sure. So I am located in Collingswood, New Jersey. I'm currently the SEL coach for the middle and high school.
Fantastic. Nice to have you here. Sumuki?
Hi, my name is Sumuki, and I'm joining from Bethesda, Maryland. And I work with School Readiness Consulting. It's a consulting firm. Their major domain is early childhood education. So yeah.
Great. And Saliha?
Hi, I am joining from Irvine, California. I am an instructional designer, and I have psychology background.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, listen, Avinash, I'm real happy to be here and have a chance to talk a little bit about what I think is a pretty important topic. Absolutely. Which is creating safe spaces for educators online. And especially over the last few years, we've seen a lot of many examples of educators facing harassment from their communities. And even if it's not harassment, perhaps you might more euphemistically call it lack of support. Communities starting in COVID seemed to get very vocal about what their teachers were doing, what the decisions the educators were making, and really, developed more of an awareness of the role that education plays in their communities. And that didn't always go well for the educators. So here, let me, we're not sharing this presentation yet, are we?
So yeah, just give me a second and let me also give a brief of, So thank you guys for joining in, and I'm Avinash. I'm one of the co-founders at Tomoclub, and we usually create a fun way for schools in the United States to teach students about social emotional learning through games. And but today we are going to talk about something that is hardly ever discussed, as Michael just mentioned about the safe space. So my thoughts is, in a highly connected world where everything we say is closely watched, the question is, how can school leaders freely share their ideas without fearing destructive criticism? Like, innovation often comes after trying and learning from mistakes. But if there's no room for mistakes, how can we learn and improve? Especially when it comes to developing new ways of teaching, changing how we teach, even debating different ideas, right? And if innovators have to be cautious for every word they say, there will be no room for innovation or creative ideas. So we'll discuss about how we can foster a safe environment. And it's a privilege today that we have Michael Bronder as a chief guest today at Tomoclub Play and Learn series. And Michael brings a wealth of expertise on this topic, as he's a founder and CEO of K12 Leaders. It's a collaborative blog and a spam-free community of K12 educators, which is dedicated to improving leadership and learning outcomes. And Michael has been in the field of education for the last 20 years with deep experience in marketing, new technologies, education, and everything. So thank you, Michael, for joining in. And can you share your perspective, maybe through slides, of how and why creating a safe space for K12 leaders is important in today's educational landscape?
Sure. And thanks, Avinash. I'm real happy to be here. And it is an important topic.
Thank you so much.
We just, I'll bring these up just to guide the conversation here. so like you said, so we have been paying a lot of attention to the sort of environment that educators work in online. And while there's been sort of a highlight of sort of like public safety issues or safety issues for educators in online spaces like Twitter and Facebook and everything recently, it really has been, since its outset, kind of a problematic environment for educators to get involved in. And I think that we could probably all go back in our own personal experience 10 or 15 years to when Facebook launched, and teachers all of a sudden finding that if they showed up on Facebook, they would be immediately subject to harassment from like the local parents groups, or simply just having questions asked in public about what happened in a classroom. Raised all sorts of issues, not just of like support of the teachers, but of student privacy and things like that. The institution of public education is so well thought through when it comes to some of the details around, say, FERPA. You could almost call it an expert system. And when you have parents who are, the customer of the system, asking questions, not fully understanding, say things like FERPA or student safety, all of a sudden that compromises. It creates a real tension in the dialogue. So more recently, one of the I was at a conference, COSIN, down in New Orleans just a couple years ago, and I found myself in a real tearful conversation with a librarian who was finding herself the subject of physical threats through Twitter. She had 20,000 followers, and somebody in their community took real issue with a book that she had on her shelves. and that really kind of exploded in the Twitter community. And she ended up getting doxxed, had people standing outside of her house harassing her physically, all sort of like spawned from this magnification of an issue that developed online. So it sort of highlights the need for a safe place, for educators to collaborate without necessarily, being harassed in that kind of way. We did a study about in 2022, exploring some of the satisfaction or lack of satisfaction issues that educators felt. This was at the height of COVID. There were all sorts of predictions about teacher staffing going off of a cliff, and so we wanted to get some real data on what the issues were for those teachers. And one of the things that we found was that parent and community attitudes was one of the high risk factors in that sort of struggle that teachers were having just to find some satisfaction or in their positions. So there were a couple of others in there, including the pressure to the pressure to stay current in their professional development without the professional development really being relevant to their job progression, lack of opportunities. There are a lot of other pressures that they were feeling that are somewhat typical of your standard employee, but this one about parent and community attitudes was really sort of at the top of the list, and was driving a lot of the problems that educators were having in their current role, to the point where they actually, for the first time in history, they were talking about leaving their profession with no notice. There were a high number of teachers talking about leaving with 2 weeks notice rather than waiting to sort of the traditional end of year sort of cycle. And so what we came together my sort of network of educators came together, and we started discussing what the opportunity was for online collaboration, to sort of answer some of those concerns. How could educators have a safe space online without being subject to those to that doxing, to the harassment, to the spam that they generally find in other environments? So from there, what we really did is we started to ask, what safety means online. And one of the things that we realized, taking a look at sort of traditional social media, context is really important, right? One of the things that we find in these large properties, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, is that there are a lot of different agendas that happen on each one of those platforms, and that's by design, right? There's a lot of crossover that these environments want to foster and rely on for creating a real dynamic space. And in a lot of places that works, right? If LinkedIn is a fantastic place for professionals in the commercial sector to collaborate. Really great place for sharing ideas. For educators, what that means if they show up into LinkedIn is that they're just open to spam. Pretty much what we find is every superintendent in the US is on LinkedIn. They log in very infrequently. And that is because when they do, they show up to an inbox of vendor emails and vendor messages that just take away any of the potential value that they might find on the platform. We find that teachers, when they show up into Facebook, they are continually exposing themselves to their community for public criticism about practices in the classroom, like I mentioned earlier. So freedom from spam, freedom from trolling, doxing, that sort of online harassment. And then another component too is sort of organizational safety. And this may be a little bit surprising to folks who are not educators, but I think it's something that educators themselves have a pretty deep experience with, Avinash, which is that for an organization like a school district that is so focused on lifting students up and helping students be successful as they progress through the system, there are often a lot of sort of bureaucratic pressures that are put on the educators themselves. And so freedom of expression is something as simple as looking for another job or exploring ideas for a career change really can end up in on an HR director's radar, a superintendent's radar. And so there is that degree of sort of anonymity that educators appreciate, as they go through, their own personal development, never mind the professional development that the institution itself demands of them.
Yeah. You know what? I have a story to add there. So do you know the founder of the company called Audio Enhancement? So these guys making the music, the sound systems in those classrooms, and then they are into a bunch of electronic products. So I was talking to the founder, and he said that we came up with a microphone for a teacher to talk in the classroom, and the microphone also has a option to turn on the camera. And they brought that technology during the COVID for live streaming. And now the teacher still keeps it on because it becomes a safety net for them, because in case a complaint happens in tomorrow, they have a record for it. And he was like, we never thought about that feature, how it's going to be shaping out. But that's something which has been picking up really fast.
And we've talked to a couple of organizations who are doing sort of that classroom monitoring.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the body cam.
Yep. Like body cam.
you know, and that's just we find that remarkable, right? I mean, and it speaks to some of the complexity of the system, right? All of the different sort of influences that come to bear on, you know, on the people who are really here to serve our kids. I mean, they've dedicated their career to serving a community's children, and I don't know how they navigate it, quite honestly. It's something that's really hard for somebody who is not in the schoolhouse to understand. And I think, you know, from a commercial perspective too, Avinash, I mean, you and I have been in this business for some time. Simply, you know, from a vendor's perspective, you know, we as the commercial providers are here to put great ideas and innovative ideas in front of educators to see what they can pick up and what will be useful to them. But the methods that we use to do that are often very out of touch with what an educator's first job is.
No, I totally get it. Sorry, I'm cutting it. Do you have another slide to show, or can I ask few questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, would love questions.
Yeah. So basically, what I want to understand is that if school leaders are feeling scrutinized for every word they say, how do you think that we can balance the need for accountability with the necessity of space for open dialogue? Because both of them have to be together taken into account, right?
Yeah, so tell me a little bit more about what you mean by accountability in that context.
So when it's about the quality check, so if a teacher has to undergo that particular piece, or the social conduct for the teachers and the scrutiny part, how are they both gonna be balanced out at the same time? What are your thoughts about it?
Right. So I think that accountability is obviously a really important part of the conversation. And from, you know, from an institutional standpoint, we all as members of a community, you know, who support public education through our taxes and what have you, accountability is important.
Yeah.
Right. We need to understand that the organization is moving in the right direction and serving our students as best they can. But those conversations, and this includes superintendents, right? This is there's something that you have to sort of separate in terms of the people who are, you know, in the midst of their lives, managing their careers, looking for satisfaction at an individual level, who have chosen to work in education. So you have to separate those people, including the superintendents and the cafeteria workers and the school nurses and the bus drivers. You have to separate them from the organization itself, right? The bureaucracy that runs it. The organization needs accountability. You have to have it. And these individuals are all interested. They're committed to providing for students and for the community. But they don't necessarily have the freedom to explore ideas and improvements that are not exactly aligned with the next most important thing that needs to happen in the district. Yeah. So that's where we really think having that safe space where you could have those structured conversations that are purpose-driven and focused, but perhaps allow more of a growth mindset than, you know, a government organization might. So that's a lot of words to answer that question, but I mean, there are two separate sides of the same coin.
Exactly.
You know, I'd welcome other folks' questions as well. I have slides to go through, but it's not necessarily, none of them are as important as any questions you might have. So feel free to chime in if there's anything that we can focus on.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so I mean, and that's really what we're talking about when we talk about organizational safety as well. And that's, you know, so what's interesting, we did a little merger earlier this year with an organization called My eCoach. And My eCoach is a 20-year-old platform. Barbara Bray, who was one of the pioneers, the digital pioneers in education 20 years ago, built this platform. And if we compare our mission statements, right, to create safe spaces for educators, her focus was really on that organizational side. You know, how do we put tools in front of educators to help them manage their careers that are independent of their employer, right? And from our perspective, the idea of safety has really evolved so that it's not just what's happening in the organization, it's actually what's happening outside of the organization now that the entire world has a view in through various social media channels. And I think that you know, brings up questions of like, what is leadership in K12? And you know, the organizations that we're part of, you know, generally have, you know, their own sort of perspectives on what leadership is. But what's, you know, sort of been apparent to me over the course of my career is that a leader, I'm going to tell you a story actually. So our next door neighbor she just moved in 2 years ago. She happens to have been my daughter's 5th grade teacher. It's wonderful. Luckily, it was a really good relationship. And she was a fantastic teacher for my daughter at the time, and is still a fantastic teacher. She's very well regarded. She doesn't go to conferences. She doesn't really look outside of her current class. They are her priority, right? We will not run into her at an ed tech conference or at a curriculum conference. But she was pivotal in my daughter's development. Pivotal, right? Highly indebted, so indebted, I still mow her lawn, right? Just really very great relationship. And while she may be a leader in her classroom every day from 8:30 till 3, she has a hard time thinking of herself as a leader in her school or a leader in her grade. And so what we really think of in terms of leadership, you can be a great practitioner, but it's when you start looking outside of your own domain, when you start looking outside of your classroom, when you start looking outside of your school, start looking outside of your district, where we, you know, for ideas that you can bring back, that we really start to open up our definition of leadership. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean intent. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking for followers. It means that you're looking to improve your practice by looking outside of your own space. How does that map to your experience, Avinash?
No, absolutely, you're right. I think the speed at which data, or I would say the speed at which things are happening in the educational world, it's phenomenal. And if the educators don't keep up, they will definitely feel left out, whether especially it's AI coming in, or whether game-based learning, or even how you're sharing the information, how you're working on collaborative documentation, the assessment tools. Like, there's so many technological changes happening that a school leader had to keep up. And it is very, I would say, daunting or intimidating at sometimes, but I know a few teachers who have been able to do that, and they can see their growth. So you are absolutely right on that. You have to look outside of your domain.
Right. And so, you know, finding those ways to collaborate are important, and they're hard.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, I think that you know, we're talking you know, a little bit about some of the challenges, right? So the organizational pressure, and sort of bureaucracy that you know, try to keep teachers or will try to maintain a status quo, is one of the pressures that keeps folks from really sort of developing their leadership or looking outside of what their daily task is. And, you know, we're faced with some other challenges that come up, you know, to finding that collaboration. And when we start thinking about the online tools that teachers have struggled with, you know, the first job of a teacher, of an educator, a principal, a superintendent, is always going to be the students before them, right? And anything that one of the traditional platforms puts in front of them is not taking those students into account, right? So there is, you know, the business models for, say, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's all about the scroll, right? It's all about that's interesting, but what's next? And I don't know a single teacher who sits in front of their third grade class scrolling on their phone.
Yeah.
Right. Or a single effective teacher sitting in front of their class scrolling on their phone. But that's exactly what those apps are designed to do. Right. Just look at one more thing. Just look at one more thing.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that algorithm that's really sort of dialed in to creating that kind of behavior that you know creates a distraction, like the persistent distraction. You know, I'll get back to that thought. I'll get back to that idea. I'm just going to, oh, that looks funny. That's cute.
Yeah,
oh,
that's
look,
a topic to discuss actually.
Right. And then you know, and that leads to you know the conflict between like sort of deferred gratification and immediate gratification. You know, I'd say that one of the things that's so impressive about educators and like they're attaining their degree is that there's the vision that they have that they will be doing good work down the road, right? They're able to put off the immediate gratification for, you know, the attainment of a goal in the future.
But tell me one thing, Michael. So if a school leader or if a school teacher wants to innovate at some space, because we're talking about a safe space, so they might be having some issues with some students or with a particular curriculum or maybe how to conduct a class. So where all can they go to discuss about it? They do have these staff meetings, they have these board meetings. Are they not enough for them to talk their heart out?
Well, so again, I think that, you know, there's the context, right? Districts put together a lot of opportunities for educators to collaborate face to face.
Yeah.
But they're all structured opportunities. Right. And I mean, tell me, Avinash, I mean, how comfortable are you if you were put in front of a group and somebody says, okay, share something about yourself that nobody knows?
No, I know that doesn't happen, but I am still comfortable. So let's say if I have problem with some, you know, way of teaching, or if I think that some particular operating procedure is archaic and doesn't make any impact anymore. So I'll be able to share that up in front of a group in my staff meetings. But of course, will that be constructive? Will that lead to any change? I might have doubts over there for sure, but at least I'll put it out. So I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to make this discussion helpful for all the people who are here, that if they are teachers, how can they express their help and how can they make impactful changes? Because at the end of the day, if a teacher is able to bring the impact, it helps the students. And that's what we all are here for, right? And so I want to understand your perspective on that particular angle.
Yeah, well, I think the question, I think it's a good question. Where do they get the new ideas? Right. You know, if all you're doing is sitting with the same people in what feels like the same meeting week after week, year after year, where do the new ideas come from? And what I might posit is that they're coming from the folks who are sitting on this webinar. They're coming from the folks who step out, who go to a conference. For some time, they were coming from the folks who collaborated really effectively on Twitter.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, when you have channels like Twitter essentially shutting down that kind of collaboration, you know, I mean, that it feels like a real loss in the community.
No, yeah,
it was just a year ago that that Twitter started charging for their verification process.
Yeah.
Right. So that really was, it was almost exactly a year ago that all of a sudden to you know, maintain your verified status was going to cost you $100 a year. And that's a real, that's a game changer for educators. Right.
So how has been the experience for school leaders at your platform? So can you tell us more about K12 leaders, and are they able to do constructive criticism as well as debates and discussions, and all these things needs a lot of social emotional skills, you know, how good active listener you are, or how well you are articulating someone else's thoughts, right? So there's a lot of social emotional skills in being a healthy contributor to any discussion, and that's why I always believe that a good teacher can lead to millions of good students. So how does K12?
Well, I think that you touched on it, right? There are so many components of social emotional learning that have been thought and solved at the student level. You know, when we start to think about what teachers need to be most effective, you know, the most effective partners in education for their students, you know, we would talk about it as, you know, building authentic relationships, right? How can you show up and be accepted in a space for who you are, where you're at that particular time? And that happens more easily when somebody feels safe. And, you know, creating the environment where folks can have those kind of conversations, make mistakes, talk about their mistakes, celebrate their mistakes. One of our friends, Carl Hooker, published a book last year called Ready, Set, Fail. And it really is all about the growth mindset, which is really hard to find in K12. There are absolutely organizations that embrace the growth mindset. And those are probably the superintendents that we see at conferences that we go to. And then there's a huge diversity in the space as well. And there are a lot of organizations that are really kind of in survival mode and don't necessarily feel like they can afford the growth mindset because it really just has to get through the day. So figuring out how we can help the individuals there is, you know, become more open to new ideas really does come through, you know, creating a space where the social and emotional components of their professional lives can be expressed.
Yep. No, I agree with you. But do you provide any professional development, or, you know, we should run any training programs where we empower leaders to, you know?
So we are a vessel. So K12 leaders, we really think about ourselves as a vessel. We have a professional pathways component that's open to any of our members, where folks can build a training or deliver their own sort of training and development through the platform. We help folks develop that. And, you know, we've done a little bit with Tomoclub and some of the content that you've published around making stuff, you know, helping teachers sort of understand SEL in that kind of environment. But the idea is really to become sort of a clearinghouse for that kind of pathway material, to help folks, find the resources they need to improve their practice.
No, exactly. So that's what we have been trying to do through these, training sessions or through these online events, of how much we can share our ideas and amplify them to more and more people. And but you did, now I'm trying to, give a different direction to our discussion. Since you have been
Sure.
running K12 leaders, since a lot of teachers are contributing to that platform, and rather than going on Twitter or LinkedIn, they're trying to come to your platform to discuss. So you must be sitting on a lot of insights, and I would love to touch upon that. First of all, I would like to understand that how do you think schools can foster an environment that can encourage experimentation and making mistakes? You just mentioned about ready, set, fail. So
yeah,
what are your personal opinions on that particular part?
So I think it really does come down to leadership, and just to be very clear about K12 leaders. I mean, the platform itself, the first thing that we promise folks is that it's private, that folks' communications are their own. So the idea of sitting on an awful lot of information, what I'm aware of are the conversations I'm directly involved in.
Oh, of course.
Right.
I didn't mean that you're doing any assessment or any kind of analytics.
No, but it's a very important clarification, Avinash, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because we don't have that algorithm. We don't have the spider that's going through. I was sitting with Alan November. We were talking this through.
Yeah.
And Alan November is one of the visionaries in the space, and his eyes lit up when he heard about what we're doing, and he was like, think about what AI could do with that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if somebody wants to sign a privacy agreement that wants to put their data into AI, open AI, we could look into that. But that is 100% not our space. Do you remember Facebook 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, where you would show up and you would actually see your friends' posts?
Yeah.
instead of every ad and every suggested topic. That's the environment that I think folks respond well to. I think there's been like this drive for profit that has really corrupted is a strong word, but really complicated social media for all of us.
Yeah, but again, asking from your personal observed experience rather than the system assessment. But has school leaders been able to successfully make actionable changes because they were active on K12 and
Sure.
get any testimonials where they're talking about, okay, now this has become our main thing that we open up in the morning?
So I think one of the other competencies of a leader is bravery.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And one of the ways to sort of cultivate your own sense of bravery is by witnessing it and being inspired by it. And I think that's where the conversations on K12 leaders have really sort of helped support that direction that you're talking about, Avinash. How do you make a change? Well, first you have to understand what change looks like. You have to have the support of your colleagues, or see ahead, see folks around you that set some sort of an example that you can build on. The district leaders that I have seen make changes have never done it easily.
Yeah.
Right. There has never been a change in K12 that was easy. But the conversations that I am part of very frequently pull in that direction. If you want to do this, then this needs to change. Yeah. If you want to do this, then focus more on this, which you've been doing, than this. Right? And some of that, actually, one of the interesting is moving to competency-based grading.
Yeah.
Right? That has been a big topic. You talk about, addressing and recognizing, the, a different level of progress, or a different sort of pace of progress for students through competency-based grading. That's something that communities have a hard time understanding. I don't know many educators who say it's a bad idea.
Absolutely.
Right? But the pressure is, that's not what colleges are going to expect. What does that do to my GPA? How does my son or daughter stand out from the crowd on this new scale of grading so that they get into Harvard? So what we have seen are conversations around folks' experience with competency grading that have helped others figure out how they could do something similar.
No, that's so true. I have two-fold questions. Okay. First is, at the end of the day, you are also creating a social media, right? Of course, your revenue streams can be subscriptions, can be vendors who want to market in an ethical manner or whatever. But to have that engagement rate high, right, you still need to make the platform engaging, exciting. So how are you going to solve for that? How are you going to make it entertaining? Let me put it like that.
Yeah. So, well, back to the idea of the algorithm, right? I think rather than entertaining, I would like it to be purpose-driven. So the thought of building community is more interesting to me, Avinash, than making something entertaining. Right. So the general approach that we're taking, and again, this helps, this is all about building authentic relationships in a safe space, is to find organizations who are interested in supporting their existing users, amplifying those users' voices, and really building a community of users. And then the intertwining of those communities, because nobody's going to be on K12 leaders and be in a single community.
Yeah.
But as folks understand what they've learned from working with one of our partners, they will bring those lessons in this purpose-driven space now, to their colleagues. And in the process, what's fun and entertaining about that are the tools that we give them to blog about their successes, right? To tell their own stories. That's fun. The conversations that they have with new colleagues, watching their followers grow, on the platform. All of that is fun. Now, I think what Tomoclub has done is fascinating in terms of creating that sort of gamified presence, right? That really ties into practical learning outcomes, right? That the approach that you've taken, and so that's fantastic. And there's a good alliance between those things that are sort of cool and fun, and aligning them with something purposeful like education, right?
Yeah.
What's so cool is that you're not, one of my favorite Flash games ever was like the snowball fight, and I could waste a ton of time playing, this little snowball fight. It did nothing for me.
Yeah.
But if we get onto Tomoclub, every one of your activities is just as engaging, and it aligns to some purpose.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I
so
agree.
I think you did a nice job with that.
That's the try. I'll tell you my personal story about the safe space about school leaders. What I have experienced. So the topic social emotional learning itself has been one of the most controversial topic in the last 2 years, with several curriculums trying to teach things that parents are not comfortable with, whether it is gender identification or sexual orientation or basically critical race theory and all those topics, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what SCL is all about. SCL is a lot more than these two topics, right? And so what I understand about my safe space as an educator who wants to bring a change in the teaching style, in the effective learning outcomes, I could not talk about that. I could not talk about my basic curriculum online. So for me, as a safe space was, as you rightly said, is conferences. So in conferences, my idea was that I could go into those sessions where I know the topic is more liberal or more inclusive, or is where people are coming with a unbiased mindset to listen and not just pin you down. And what I understood was every school leader understands the importance of it, understands the skills we are trying to teach, but they help me guide of how you market it or how you present it in front of a school district to make it a success. Because at the end of the day, the students has to receive the value out of it. And those discussions were intense. Sometimes there were many times back and forth of they correcting me, I'm correcting them, and I love that. So for me, the definition of or the experience of safe space between K12 leaders was that one-to-one, or sometimes even one-to-many if the room is conducive in that way, right? And even those conferences helped me a lot in understanding the trends, that what is the thought process, what's the flavor of the season going on among the school leaders. So for me, when I think about K12 leaders as a platform that you have created, if I can get these two values in real time, then it would be a massive value for me. If I believe that I can come to your platform and I will understand about the trends, if I can get into a debate without the fear of being cancelled, then I think that then you will achieve something very, very important for our innovation, for new ideas to come up and correct. And I think that has helped me take Tomoclub to various school districts, various states. Uh, and I have been successful in doing that without getting into controversy.
I think one of the things that you've brought to Tomoclub is your authentic self, Avinash, right? It's like I think that people respond to that, so, and Scott, I have to apologize. I just saw your question from a half hour ago, about changing online behavior. What can we do to change online behavior? And I think that it comes to it, it's answered by this. It's like, how do you present your authentic self online? And in my experience, it's not that everybody has to be your friend. It's not that everybody has to like what you are doing. But I know few people who, when they are in an authentic relationship, behave badly towards each other, right? And that includes good salesmanship, right? If you're running an organization, Avinash, and you have to get the solution in front of folks, people do business with who they trust, right? And hard to build trust if you're not your authentic self. And one of the struggles, Scott, to that was, when Twitter started charging for their for their verified badge, right? That really starts to shut down that kind of ability to trust who you're working with. One of the things that we do at K12 Leaders, and it's possible because we're never going to have 1 million participants, is that we actually physically verify every single person who comes on the platform. We know they are who they say they are, and that's important for creating that safe space and making sure that the behavior is good.
I have put up a question. Others can also do, because we are in the last 9 minutes of our discussion. So yeah, can you pick up this question, Michael?
Which is what that, Avinash?
Yeah, the last one. Can you share some successful strategies or initiatives that school or teachers can implement to create a safe space for leaders?
Yeah, I think keeping leaders out of the room is one of them, right? You know, and I think it comes, part of this is trusting that, okay, making sure that everybody understands the mission of the organization, right? The mission, vision, values has been driven down people's throats. And it's generally because it's a poorly executed exercise, right? How do you actually come up with an authentic mission, right? The schools that I've seen be successful, the honest to goodness, are the ones who have gone through the 3-year period where they are reflecting on who they are as an organization, and they drag people through those painful conversations so they can come up with what seems like a silly acronym about you know, the 4 C's or what have you. But those are the schools that have demonstrated that they're bought into the process, right? And then when they take that process and they put it in place, it just shows follow through, right? And starts to build trust.
Yeah.
But trusting your leaders to have conversations without somebody watching over them, whether that's teachers, whether that's principals, whether that's assistant superintendents, but taking the boss out of the room, I think, is a big deal. And then asking for results. You guys go to dinner. You guys have this forum. You guys take the teacher's lounge. We're hands off. You know what our mission is. How do you make decisions to execute our value?
Yeah, I have one additional idea to it. I think you can call it anything, professional development, training, or upskilling, but upskilling of teachers is also important, in which they learn the skills of emotional intelligence, of collaboration, where, like, a lot of times in our discussion, we always say, don't use the word but. It should be and or. So how are you going to build ideas on top of each other? If you have to give feedback, give one-to-one feedback rather than publicly criticizing. So I think those SEL skills, I think, might help in, you know, creating that safe space.
Right. I think absolutely. You know, those the SEL skills help you present yourself more authentically, right? Your needs are met, and you're able to engage more effectively with your colleagues.
Nice. Oh, I have another question from Scott. Who could be the early adopters to set up a Tomoclub forum for education, new ideas versus business startups? Scott, would you like to explain it a little bit more?
Yeah, one of the things that's really fascinating, there is a forum, lack of a better way of calling it, that's free. It's called Lunch Club.
Yeah.
And Lunch Club is kind of the set aside thing. You can actually put your LinkedIn profile to it, but it's kind of set up for business and startup ideas. And I will tell you, I have probably over 120 meetings in Lunch Club over probably the last couple of years. But the fantastic, what I would call velocity of ideas going both ways, me giving someone an idea on their startup and vice versa.
Yeah,
really, really powerful. And you know, Michael, to your point is, if the people like Twitter, I mean, you know, Twitter charges for the blue check, LinkedIn charges for the premium. You know, I think all of them, even Instagram now charges for that. So the question would be, you know, how would you do something different to really, establish a forum. I think Tomoclub provides a really great framework. And is there a way that you could go grab a set of people to put in a Tomoclub framework that plays off their platform for great ideas?
Absolutely. I think that's you just defined the model right there, Scott. Right. That's so there's so many analogies in to what you're saying. K12 Leaders is essentially lunch club for education.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So and as far as creating that framework, the Tomoclub framework or Tomoclub community within K12 Leaders, that's exactly the idea.
Yeah.
Right. Where we get folks who are familiar with Tomoclub, who are bought into the values and the direction that Tomoclub wants to take them, and start engaging with each other in that kind of a community, so that they can magnify the impact that they're having. Right. That's exactly.
Yeah. But Michael, what I was really trying to drive to, right, is that the early adopters, trying to figure out a way to really grab the early adopters to really scale that exponential, I'll just call it sign up, but how do you get that mass movement of momentum that people gravitate to? Is like, oh, that's got to be really cool because look how fast it's grown. Okay. And I think that would be really, just something to, think through. How do you get that type of framework to really grab in the educational space?
Right. So it's that's an open question, right? We see, it when you, in our experience, Scott. So we've no advertising, entirely word of mouth. We've come up to about 30,000 email subscribers and about 10,000 active members on the platform in a year, right? So that is a certain pace of growth. When you compare that to somebody like Blue Sky or Mastodon, who shows up and they end up with 10 million members within a week, right? There are two different scales that we're operating on there,
right?
And the economy around it just has to be rethought, right? It's like we know what happens. We know what happens when you get 1 billion users on a platform.
Yeah. What's the value proposition, right? It's the customer value prop, right? And my put is, what's the customer value prop to really drive educational excellence? It's kind of what I would come back to Tomoclub and say, hey, could you do that inside the framework of Tomoclub?
Right.
So yeah, answering to you, Scott, that's our long-term vision. So what we are doing right now is whenever we work with a school or any organization, we create these cohorts of students who basically experience new games every week. And each of these games are delivering a lesson plan. Now, what we want is that 1 week, 1 hour class is not enough to engage them throughout the year or throughout the week. So we want to create a kind of a forum where they can bounce the ideas, they can share their understanding about the topic much better. And those forums, we want the teachers to run rather than us guiding it. So let's say we started to do that a pilot on Discord initially because students were mostly active there. But as per COPPA compliance, we can't be directly dealing with kids. So that's why we decided that it should be a student-led initiative for the students. Then that avoids any direct connection of Tomoclub as an organization with the students, and which the compliances don't want, which makes sense. So I think I'll be most happiest in the world if I would get to know in the coming future that those students are starting to create their own forums and discussing about Tomoclub. And because of Tomoclub, they're discussing about skills, they're discussing new ideas, and whether that community can be on Snapchat, K12 Leaders, or Discord or Slack. I don't want to control it, but let it flourish. And someday we can definitely create our own community on our own website or on our own dashboard but that will be the epitome of success for us. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, how do you create those authentic relationships between your users, right?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah. In fact, you know what students are missing? So what happens is, so one of the students actually left the school, so they dropped out of the cohort, and the other students were actually asking about him. And even the mother reached out to us that we have to, shift to a new city, to a new school. Can my child be a part of Tomoclub? Even though he has moved out of the school.
That's
So
great.
we could see that intent and that product love from the students, and that's we want to continue and working upon.
Right. Excellent.
So
you're doing good work, Avinash.
Yep.
That's fantastic.
I think this was very, very fruitful conversation, and I think it's a start to this complicated topic, how teachers and educators can feel safe to discuss their ideas. And all the best to Michael on this journey of K12 leaders. Keep on doing it, keep on being successful. And yeah, thank you so much for joining in, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Avinash. Thank you all.
Oh, yep, absolutely. I have a chat. Oh, we have a kid in hospital and the mom reached out saying that it's a Oh my God. Chelsea, that's fantastic. So she was telling a story, of how a child was missing the cohort and the fun, even though he was at a hospital. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for sharing that. And yeah, have a good day, guys. Thank you for joining in. Take care. Okay, Michael, see you.
See you. Bye, Avinash.